We live in an age of excess. It's all about more, faster, better, and bigger all the time. We at Engadget get wrapped up in that a lot too, and it's hard not to when there's always some flashy new smartphone released right around the corner. The last few years, though, have proven that you don't need to spend an arm and a leg to get some truly great hardware. That's where the Galaxy S10e comes in. Forget the excess. This phone is all about delivering the essentials of the Galaxy S10 experience in a package that feels a whole lot more manageable, both physically and financially. You'll get most of what makes Samsung's flagship S10 phones such excellent devices for as little as $749. And after living with the phone for about a week, the S10e has never left me feeling like I was working with a lesser smartphone, even with its smaller screen and its fewer cameras. It is a true powerhouse of a device, just with a few compromises. You probably wouldn't be able to tell just by looking at it though. The S10e comes clad in the same glossy finishes as the regular S10, and the same slightly squarish design has been carried over too. The physical similarities don't end there either. There is a USB-C port and a headphone jack on the phone's bottom, a SIM tray that also takes micro SD cards as large as 512 gigs, and as usual, there is a Bixby button on the phone's left side so you can talk to Samsung's slightly improved virtual assistant, which we'll dig into more a little later. It even has the wireless power share system built into the back of the phone so you can wirelessly charge the phone or charge other devices with the phone. That's actually particularly cool since I've been using the S10e to charge the Galaxy Watch Active I'm also reviewing. It's not terribly fast, but it often gave my watch just the extra amount of charge it needed to get through a long night. It's also worth noting that the metal frame the S10e is built around actually has slightly wider size, and that might not sound too important, but it actually makes the S10e noticeably easier to grip than either of those bigger models. So, all told, yes, the S10e is every bit as well designed and as well engineered as its siblings. I do have a few quibbles though. I'm all for phones that don't make your wrist hurt when you use them, but the S10e is so light it honestly feels a little insubstantial. I mean, this phone is basically begging to be put into a case. It doesn't help that this thing is really slippery either. Do yourself a favor and just trust me, do not put this phone down on a surface that isn't completely flat. And then there's the fingerprint sensor. Some people have found the ultrasonic in-display sensor in the S10 and the S10 Plus a little finicky, so Samsung's decision to use something a little more traditional here might not seem like a compromise. That's true to an extent. When you get your finger on there just right, you can unlock your phone almost instantaneously. The problem is the fingerprint sensor kind of sits high on the phone's right side, so using it sometimes requires a bit of a stretch with your thumb, especially for people with small hands. Lefties might be in particular trouble. I have never been able to unlock the phone with my index finger on the first try. It's pretty annoying. Maybe you'll have better luck than me. Of course, you could easily say nuts to all of this and just set up Face Unlock instead, but since that feature just uses saved image data of your face, it's not the most secure way to go. Anyway, Samsung says it focused on two areas with the Galaxy S10 family, the screens and the cameras, and I doubt any of you would be surprised that these are the areas where the S10e stands apart from its siblings. For those of you concerned about the screen, just don't be. Yes, the 5.8-inch dynamic AMOLED screen here is noticeably smaller than the one on the S10, and I have honestly had some trouble relearning how to type on a display like this. Then again, if you're coming from a tiny device already or just prefer having a relatively pint-sized phone in general, you're going to feel right at home here. It doesn't hurt that the display here is, as usual, totally gorgeous. This is one of Samsung's first HDR10 Plus certified screens, and the colors just sing. It only runs at Full HD or 2280 by 1080 for those keeping count. And yes, that is a far cry from the 3040 by 1440 resolution the S10 Plus runs at. I've been using both of those phones extensively this week, and frankly, the difference is not that noticeable. The S10 Plus's display is more pixel dense and therefore better at showing off fine detail, but in terms of brightness and colors, the S10e gets really close. For many of you, the S10e will also be the first phone you've ever used with a hole punch display. It's okay, just embrace it. Seeing a hole cut out of a screen to let a 10 megapixel camera peek through is weird at first, and it always looks a little out of place when you're watching full screen videos or playing games. Still, I have come to appreciate this approach more than screens with notches. The cutout is off in a corner where your eyes are never really lingering long for anyway. I promise, this is the kind of thing most of you will get used to pretty quickly. But I mean, hey, just look at this thing. You're probably going to know very quickly whether or not this is something you can live with, but I bet you can. And then there are the cameras. The S10e uses almost the exact same camera setup as the regular S10, just without the telephoto zoom around the back. The remaining 10 megapixel front camera, 12 megapixel wide, and 16 megapixel ultra wide cameras are exactly what you would get if you decided to pay more money. And you don't need me to tell you that's a good thing, right? I will anyway though, because Samsung's cameras this year are fantastic. Google's Pixels are proof that you can get some incredible photos with a single sensor, and they're still arguably the best at taking night photos, but multiple cameras in this case is definitely a good thing. I've been shooting with the S10e for about a week though, and it's a serious contender. Image quality seems marginally better than what I saw last year with the Note 9, and even you really picky pixel peeper types are going to find a lot of detail to dig into. And Samsung's image processing means the things you see in the S10e's pictures often look a little better than they do in reality. That's nothing new though. Devices like the iPhone XS and the Nokia 9 tend to capture objects as they really appear. Samsung's cameras, on the other hand, tend to amp up the saturation and dynamic range to produce almost idealized versions of the world around you. The S10es really shine in their flexibility though. As far as I'm concerned, Samsung made the right decision to axe the telephoto camera here. The ultra-wide camera captures a 123-degree field of view, which is meant to mimic what you can see with your eyes, and it excels at giving your photos a sense of space and scope that they would have otherwise lacked. The same caveats we ran into with the S10 Plus apply here though. If you're standing a little too close to your subject, you'll probably notice some barrel distortion around the edges. If you're standing really close to your subject, the effect gets even worse. Thankfully, you can toggle a setting that tries to correct that distortion after you've taken the photo. It works pretty well most of the time, but the easiest fix, honestly, might just be to back up a little bit first. Still, the ultra-wide camera offers some new perspectives when taking photos, and to me, that's worth losing optical zoom. That approach also carries over to the front-facing camera. It takes perfectly nice selfies, especially once the aggressive beauty mode is turned off, and you can toggle the camera to take slightly more expansive shots. There are a few tricks to keep in mind here too, like an occasionally handy shot suggestion mode that basically offers advice on how to frame your shot. It just kind of tells you where to point your camera, and I honestly ended up ignoring it about half the time because it wanted me to point the camera at something that didn't make a whole lot of sense. You can also shoot HDR10+ video at 4K if that's your thing, not to mention well-stabilized, super steady video as long as you can live with 1080p footage. I'm not sure any of these are make-or-break features for the Galaxy S10e, but the fact that they're here proves that Samsung wasn't willing to water down the camera experience just to save some money. The S10e's performance hasn't been watered down either. Honestly, I'm not going to dwell on it too much because the S10e is right up there with the Galaxy S10 Plus, but just remember this. The S10e uses the exact same Snapdragon 855 as the other S10s, and even though our review unit only has 6 gigs of RAM compared to the S10 Plus's 8 gigs, they appear to run equally as fast. You'll notice the difference between these two phones once you get enough apps running side by side and jump between them a lot, but honestly, no one was going to do that but us phone reviewers, and the difference is basically negligible anyway. Whether you're gaming hard or just trying to get through your workday, there is more than enough power here for you. If you're thinking of splurging on an S10 Plus, it should be for reasons other than performance. I should also point out that Samsung's new One UI on top of Android 9.0 is kind of a revelation, especially if you're coming from an older Samsung device. It's a lot smoother and cleaner than the TouchWiz interface of old, even if getting to certain options still takes a few steps. It's not perfect, but there is enough to like here that I'm actually looking forward to new Samsung software. A system-wide dark mode, support for gesture and button navigation, redesigned menus for better one-handed use, sign me up. Since this is Samsung we're talking about though, we still have Bixby to deal with. The virtual assistant has gotten a little more competent since last year, and it now has the ability to run routines made of specific device actions depending on what time it is or where you are. Ultimately though, the best part about Bixby this year is that you can remap that button to do something else entirely. And of course there is the battery to talk about. There is a 3100 milliamp hour cell tucked away inside the Galaxy S10e, and that's a little on the small side, but then again, this is a small phone. You should still expect to get between 12 and 14 hours of pretty consistent use out of this thing on a single charge, and if you play your cards right, that'll likely be closer to a day and a half as long as you don't go crazy with your S10e. So with all of that said, should the Galaxy S10e be your new phone? Well, it kind of depends. If all you care about is getting a very pocketable phone with excellent performance and some great cameras, then yeah, why not? In fact, it's by far the best small Android phone we've tested in a really long time. This thing might not be the most exciting of Samsung's new phones, but it's the most accessible, and that counts for a lot. If you're out there looking for the best of the best, go ahead, splurge on a Galaxy S10, you're gonna love it. But if your Galaxy S7 or your LG G5 or whatever is getting a little long in the tooth and you don't want to worry about upgrading again anytime soon, the S10e just might be perfect for you. Despite what its price tag might suggest, you'll still be working with plenty of power and functionality for years to come.